We begin shortly after Ash's victory over Brandon, as everyone gathers outside the battle pyramid to congratulate Ash. With a smile, Scott presents the young man with a framed case containing all its frontier symbols, while formally inducting him into the Battle Frontier Hall of Fame. However, this is not the only thing Scott has for Ash, as he adds that he would like to extend an invitation for the boy to become the newest Frontier Brain, a privilege only extended to those who have completed the Battle Frontier Challenge. This gives Ash pause, as on one hand, to become a Frontier Brain would mean to end his journey, but on the other, he would get to battle lots of strong trainers, all of whom had been handpicked by Scott to give his Frontier Brains a run for their money. Figuring that if he ever wants to travel again, he can step down or go on break, Ash ultimately decides to accept the offer, making Scott beam, as he grins that he knew Ash would make the right call. He then tells the young man to come with him, since they'll need to get some stuff sorted out at Battle Frontier HQ back in Celadon, and they don't have a moment to lose. For a second, Ash looks back at his friends, as if about to tell them to come on, but then he remembers that May and Max are both shipping off to Johto in a few days, and Brock, while a loyal companion, has his own dreams, which won't be achieved by following him to Battle Frontier HQ, meaning that for now, this is goodbye. Walking over to the Petalburg siblings, Ash flashes them each a grin, telling May to win the Johto Grand Festival, and Max to come challenge his battle facility when he's become a trainer in his own right, with the pair both promising to do exactly that, as they each give the brain to be a high five. Next, Ash approaches Brock, though here he finds himself at a loss for words. Sure, he and Brock split up briefly during their time in the Orange Islands and again after their Johto journey, there's something about this feels far more final. Seeing that the boy is struggling to speak, Brock decides to do the heavy lifting, extending a hand and telling Ash that he knows he'll make a great Frontier Brain. Reaching out to clasp the hand, Ash replies that he also knows Brock will make an amazing breeder, with the young men each meeting each other's eyes and sharing a smile that says even though their paths may diverge, they will always be friends. With his goodbyes now out of the way, Ash at last returns to Scott, joining him, Professor Oak and Nurse Joy as they drive away in the red convertible, while beside him, Officer Jenny and Squirtle depart one way, and Charizard soars overhead. Unfortunately for Scott's passengers, his claim about not having a moment to lose is meant rather literally, with the sunglasses-clad man employing his usual reckless driving style to get them back to the Pokemon Center and Oak's lab at top speed. When the others are gone, Scott then begins to speak with Ash, explaining that as a new Frontier Brain, he has several important decisions he has to make, such as the design of his symbol, the location of his battle facility, and the rules he wants to put in place to test his challenges. So it might be worth giving that some thought during the drive, since once the boilerplate is out of the way, he'll be right on to work. Taking this to heart, Ash remains rather quiet over the next few days as he and Scott travel to Celadon City, with the only thing capable of stirring him from his reverie being their arrival at Battle Frontier HQ. Like most buildings in Celadon, the headquarters of the Battle Frontier is a skyscraper, with Ash and Scott riding the elevator all the way to the top floor before stepping out into Scott's office. Letting out a relaxed sigh, Scott admits that while he prefers to wander, he can't deny that he loves the view up here, bidding Ash to take a seat. When the two of them are seated on opposite sides of a decadent mahogany desk, Scott presses a button, causing the large window showcasing Celadon City to transform into a TV screen, with it transmitting 7 evenly sized boxes, which one by one begin to fill with the faces of the 7 Frontier Brains: Noland, Greta, Tucker, Lucy, Spencer, Annabelle, and Brandon. With the exception of the Pyramid King, who already knows what Scott is about to tell them, the Brains ask what their boss is calling them for, with Scott in turn explaining that Ash has agreed to join their ranks. This puts a smile on everyone's face, with each of them congratulating Ash on his victory and welcoming him to the club, with Annabelle seeming particularly pleased, as she comments that though she's not a clairvoyant, she had a feeling Ash would be joining them. Grinning broadly, Scott thanks his employees for greeting Ash so warmly, saying that he hopes he can count on each of them to help Ash out if he needs any guidance in his new duties as a Frontier Brain. Nodding, the group of 7 all promise to do so, though before the meeting can be brought to a close, Spencer states that he has an announcement to make. Now that they have a new brain to keep up their numbers, he intends to retire, since with youngsters like Greta, Annabelle, and Ash coming up, he believes it's time for old buffers such as himself to step aside. Good-naturedly, Nolan says that Spencer's still got plenty of good battling years left in him, though with a grin, the old sage suggests that he might also consider retiring, a claim which earns a shocked exclamation from the factory head as he protests that he's not that old. Laughing heartily, Scott tells the Brains he's going to wrap this up before anyone's feelings get hurt. Then with a wave, he disengages the monitor, leaving just himself and Ash in the office. With the matter of informing the other Frontier Brains of Ash's decision out of the way, Scott now turns back to the boy, asking if he's decided any of the questions he posed him on the way, to which the raven-haired youth replies that he has, and more than that, he's ready to get underway. The first and most pressing matter is that of location, with Ash explaining that he wants his facility to be as close to Pallet Town as possible so he can visit his mum and his friends, with Scott calling this a great idea. Thanks to his vast network of contacts, the Frontier boss is quickly able to secure a parcel of land a few hours' walk from Ash's hometown, with construction beginning immediately. Naturally, Ash is deeply involved in the design of his new battle facility, naming it the Battle Junction, as the thing which most excites him about becoming a Frontier Brain is the chance to meet and battle new people, making this a fitting name. As a result, the next few months are split between overseeing the construction of the Battle Junction and training at Oak's lab with his Pokemon, as he'll need all their help for this next leg of his journey. This even involves bringing Charizard, Pidgeot, and Primeape back permanently permanently, with Pikachu and Bulbasaur being delighted to see their old traveling companions again. The other big task that takes up Ash's time is the creation of his symbol. Wanting to make this something special, he spends many hours contemplating this, even getting help from Tracy as someone who has an eye for aesthetics. However, it is actually his mum Delia who helps him the most, as one evening after a fruitless day of designing, she suggests he think about the things that really mean something to him. Smiling, Ash replies that's easy: his friends, his Pokemon, and his adventures, with Delia saying that this is his answer. He just needs to find a way to represent that in an image. Casting his eyes around in confusion, Ash soon spots Pikachu seated beside him wearing his cap, and as an idea fills his head, he begins to grin that this is perfect. The following morning, Ash calls Scott, showing him the design he has settled on, with it being modelled on the hat he wore during so many adventures. Smiling that it's bold, but simple, Scott is happy to accept this design, naming it the adaptability symbol in honour of its creator. Finally, after what seems like both an eternity and no time at all, the battle junction is finished, with Scott inviting Ash and all his friends to have a joint tour and party the night before it is set to open. Due to the significance of this event in Ash's life, all his friends and family attend, with the guest list being Ash, Scott, Delia, Professor Oak, Brock, Misty, Tracy, May, Max, and the Frontier Brains. The only one who can't make it is Gary, though he sends his regards, promising that once he gets back from his research fellowship in Sinnoh, he'll be sure to give the facility a visit. Naturally, it is a night of high spirits, with everyone toasting Ash as he leads them through the battle junction. Due to Ash not being a super complicated guy, his facility is similarly straightforward, with it just being a large glass dome resembling a greenhouse, with a central battle room as well as a small back room housing a healing machine. The only features of the facility that prove out of the ordinary can be found on the battlefield, which Ash demonstrates can be changed either manually or randomly to one of several different terrains, with the young Frontier Brain explaining that the theme of his facility is adaptability, so having to adapt to the battlefield is one of the ways he plans to challenge his challenges. The other oddity is a structure resembling a high-tech bird bath located beside Ash's trainer box, and as they approach it, Scott explains that it is a miniature Pokeball transfer machine, with Ash simply needing to select which of his Pokemon he wants, and it will be sent right to him from Oak's lab. Grinning, Ash adds this will be particularly important considering the main rule of the battle junction, that each round, the challenger must battle at a type disadvantage. Frowning a little, Misty asks if that isn't a bit unfair, though Scott replies that actually it's brilliant, since by implementing this rule, challengers will be forced to adapt and overcome disadvantages, something Ash himself has proved is doable time and time again through his unorthodox battling style. Nodding, Ash's friends all agree that it's just like him to make boneheaded stubbornness in the face of bad odds a central feature of his facility, a claim which makes the boy sweat drop as he sighs they didn't have to put it so bluntly. However, here Brock changes the subject, having a question of his own. Without hesitation, Scott tells the pewter gym leader to lay it on him, with Brock asking what happens if a challenger uses a Pokemon Ash doesn't own anything strong against. Grinning, the Frontier boss calls this a good question, the one they've already thought of a solution to, with him having left a series of powerful Pokemon in the care of Professor Oak for Ash to use if it ever happens. Though, since being a Frontier Brain isn't a full-time gig, Ash will have plenty of chances to fill up his own roster with new Pokemon, so that before long, he won't need the rentals anymore. Finally, the tour comes to an end, with Ash thanking everyone for coming, though before the group can dissipate, Scott informs Ash that he must pass one more test before he can officially take his place as a Frontier Brain. He must battle Scott himself. Grinning, Ash replies that he's got no complaints about that, and so returning to the battlefield, he begins firing up the machines for the first match of the battle junction. To ensure the type disadvantage rule is maintained, Ash explains that their battle will actually be 3 one-on-one battles, with the winner being determined in a best-out-of-3 format, meaning there will be no substitutions, and Scott as the challenger will be required to choose first every time. Smiling broadly, Scott calls this firm but fair, as he reveals his first Pokemon to be none other than Tyranitar. At once, the machine beside Ash begins scanning the Green Goliath, with it quickly projecting holograms of all of his Pokemon who fit the criteria. After a moment of consideration, Ash taps one of the holograms, and at once the selection screen fades, instead being replaced by a crackle and a flash as a Pokeball appears in the dish on top of the device. Grabbing hold of the ball, Ash lobs it into the air, showing his first Pokemon to be Heracross, with a Battle Beetle bursting onto the field. Speaking of the field, the Battle Junction's randomizer has selected a rock battlefield for the first stage of this match, and while this is more favourable to Tyranitar than Heracross, Ash isn't worried. Since he chose first, Scott is also given the first move, with him ordering Tyranitar to use Fire Fang, hoping to capitalise on his super effective move as he's well aware that his Pokemon is weak to Heracross's bug moves and quad weak to its fighting moves. However, being quick on its feet, or rather wings, Heracross is able to flit back, avoiding the hit, then coming in for a fierce Mega Horn right to Tyranitar's gut. Letting out a pained roar, the Titanic Tyrant swipes at Heracross with its tail, striking it, and seeing it crashing onto its back with its own chitter of pain. Pressing this advantage, Scott next has Tyranitar use Stomp, with the armor Pokemon driving a plated foot into Heracross. Though, here Ash meets the attack head-on, having used Tyranitar's approach to charge up a Focus Punch. Being quite effective, this vastly outclasses the Stomp in terms of power, with Tyranitar not only being knocked back, but also put off balance so that it staggers backwards and lands on its backside with a heavy thump. This is just the opening Ash and Heracross need, and as Tyranitar attempts to lumber back to its feet, the bug is far blaster, taking to the air and driving one last Megahorn right into the green Goliath's face. This proves too much for Tyranitar, and as it slumps forward, a large scoreboard on the wall declares Ash the winner of the first round, putting the score at 0-1. In keeping with the rules, both trainers then recall their Pokemon, and as the battle computer randomly assigns them a new field, Scott unveils his second Pokemon, going with Dragonite. As Ash only has one Pokemon that fits the bill this time, the selection screen does not appear, instead simply teleporting in the Pokemon's ball. Grabbing hold of it, Ash grins that it's been a while since they've battled together, then with a cry of its name, he brings Glalie out onto the field, which in this case is a simple regulation battlefield, like one would find in a gym or at the Pokemon League. Grinning as well, Scott praises that Ash is really thinking like a frontier brain with these choices, though he's afraid that if Ash thinks type advantage will make this an easy win, he's in for a rude awakening. To prove this point, Scott opens with a Fire Blast, with Ash barely having time to call for a double team, as the flaming Kanju shoots towards his Ice-type friend. This trick does manage to save Glalie, with the Fire Blast passing harmlessly through one of the duplicates. Though still smiling, Scott lightly chides that he thought Ash would know him well enough by now to realize smoke and mirrors aren't going to stop him. He then cocks his head slightly as if listening very close to something, while softly wagging a finger back and forth like a metronome. After a moment of this, he declares that he's got it. Then, as he raises the finger, he points at the centermost Glalie clone and tells Dragonite to fire on his mark. Loyally, the dragon type waits. Then on its trainer's command, it lets loose a full power Fire Blast which strikes the real Glalie head on, just as Scott knew it would. Letting out a shriek and spinning in midair, Glalie comes to a stop in front of Ash, who asks if it's alright, with the face Pokemon nodding once more, then turning its piercing blue eyes back to Dragonite. Like last time, Scott has chosen to use his opponent's moment of vulnerability to his advantage, closing the distance and attempting to strike with Steel Wing. However, unlike last time, this attack is successful, with Glalie being sent high into the air, where it cries out in terror as Dragonite follows it upwards. Desperately, Ash tells his frosty friend to use Ice Beam, though as Glalie fires blue bolts of energy down at Dragonite, Scott has his dragon counter with Hyper Beam. In such a clash, it is no contest, with the orange stream completely disintegrating the icy blasts, so that when the harsh light of the attack fades, it is to reveal Glalie falling to earth, where it lands with a hard thunk, spirals in its eyes. Up on the scoreboard, Scott receives his first point, tying the match and requiring the pair of battlers to go into a third and final round. As the duo recall their Pokemon, Scott poses Ash a question, asking if he's ever stopped to consider why guys like Nolan and Brandon, who both use legendaries, work for him. Looking a little puzzled, Ash admits that now that Scott mentions it, it is odd they would work for anyone, with the Frontier boss noting that while it would certainly seem that way, Ash will understand why once he's seen his last Pokemon. He then pulls out a very battered looking Ultra Ball, from which he brings forth his final Pokemon, and as he does, rainbow light fills the battle junction, causing the assembled spectators and even Ash himself to gasp as they behold the majesty of Ho-Oh up close. Looking the rainbow Pokemon in the eye, Ash breathes that he knows this Ho-Oh, saying that he and Pikachu saw her on the first day of their journey so long ago, and then again on the day of their first match with Brandon. Nodding, Scott agrees, saying that most of the time he lets his buddy roam free, but he brought it here tonight because he wants to test Ash against the best of the best, and that means Ho-Oh. Beaming broadly, Ash says in that case, he knows exactly who he's going to use, and ignoring his transfer machine, he instead looks to Pikachu, asking if he's up for a battle. Flashing his cheeks, the electric rodent eagerly agrees, and as a water field rises into place, he leaps off of Ash's shoulder and onto one of the floating platforms. As usual, Scott moves first, telling Ho to use Flamethrower, though as the rainbow bird rains its celestial blaze down on Pikachu, the little electric rodent dodges, leaping from platform to platform and closing in on his prey. When he is close enough, he fires off a thunderbolt of his own, though just like him, Ho-Oh dodges, making this opening salvo something of a bust for both sides. Seeing that ranged attacks won't work, the Frontier boss next calls for a Brave Bird, with Ho-Oh briefly becoming a phoenix wreathed in flames before they cool into a cloak of bright blue energy. The now blue bird then directs itself right at Pikachu, who once more goes for a Thunderbolt, and while this is enough to irritate Ho-Oh, it is not enough to stop it, with the living legend soon stretching out a wing and driving into Pikachu's chest. Truthfully, with the size difference between the Pokemon, this lariat actually strikes Pikachu's entire front, sending him skipping across the pool like a stone, before crushing back hard into the wall. Worriedly, Ash asks if his buddy is alright, to which the electric rodent gives a resolute nod, before leaping back into the pool and restarting the battle. Smiling easily, Scott comments that Pikachu really does have guts, though he's known that since his match with Agatha the day they first met. Grinning too, Ash nods that he remembers, then with a look of determination similar to his partner, calls for a third Thunderbolt. Letting out a mighty cry, the mouse does as he's told, shooting electricity up at Ho-Oh, though this time, Scott does not mess around, skipping Flamethrower entirely and ordering his old friend to use Sacred Flame. At once, the fires of heaven rain down on Pikachu, and knowing there's no way they can counter it, Ash tells the starter to dive deep into the water, with the electric rodent doing exactly exactly that, and it is fortunate that he does, as the destructive power of Sacred Flame is unlike anything Ash has ever seen, immolating every single platform and even setting the surface of the water on fire. It is beautiful and terrible in equal measure, and as Pikachu surfaces, Ash calls to him, relieved to see that he's alright. However, it seems that Ash and Pikachu's nightmare is not over yet, as in a low voice, Scott reveals Ho-Oh's fourth and final move, Earthquake. All it takes is a single flap of Ho-Oh's wings to turn the pool beneath into a maelstrom, and as tidal waves begin rising up which can almost touch the ceiling, poor Pikachu finds himself right in the middle of it all. Knowing his buddy can't endure much more of this, Ash tells him to use Quick Attack, while waving his tail like a fin, a trick which surprisingly works, with Pikachu shooting out of a wave just as it reaches its zenith. This puts the rat directly above Ho-Oh, and seeing a chance to get back in the fight, Ash tells him to bring the hammer down with Iron Tail. Cheeks crackling once more in anticipation, Pikachu does exactly this, igniting his tail with a bright glow, then swinging it down so it rams between Ho-Oh's wing joints. This actually elicits a squawk of pain from the legendary, with Scott instructing it to throw Pikachu off. However, try as it might, the rainbow Pokemon is unable to be rid of its unwelcome rider, with this giving Pikachu just the opportunity he needs to blast Ho-Oh with a series of point-blank super effective thunderbolts. By now Ho-Oh is crying out in agony, and not wanting his friend to suffer, Scott decides not to hold anything back, ordering another Brave Bird. As expected, when Ho-Oh lights itself on fire, Pikachu has no choice but to retreat, though this may not be as wise as it seems, as now that he is off Ho-Oh's back, the bird can target him with the attack, slamming its beak into Pikachu this time and sending him smacking down into Ash's trainer box, with enough force to leave a crater. For a moment, no one speaks, waiting to see if Pikachu has enough strength left to get up. Though never one to let his best friend down, Pikachu manages, staggering back to his feet and staring up at Ho-Oh as if challenging it to try again. This is a challenge Ho-Oh is more than happy to accept, with it readying another Sacred Flame on Scott's command, and as Pikachu scurries up Ash's back and springs from his head, he meets the blast with a full power Thunderbolt, which carries with it every ounce of strength the mouse has left. For a moment, these two attacks meet mid-air, the power of them keeping the other at bay, though unfortunately, this stalemate was not made to last, as while one combatant is a beast of legend, who was revered as a god by the people of ancient Johto, the other is a common rodent of no special pedigree. As a result, when one side falters, it is Pikachu, with the little electric type being consumed by flames and sent hurtling towards the ground. Taking a running leap, Ash manages to catch his burning buddy in mid-air, taking the brunt of the landing for him and using his vest to put him out. Unsurprisingly, Pikachu is unconscious after such a brutal assault, though as Ash cradles him in his arms and thanks him for putting in such a great effort, the electric rodent nuzzles his cheek against his trainer affectionately. Rising to his feet, Ash congratulates Scott and Ho-Oh on their victory, and though he wears his smile well, his friends know that he is disappointed with the outcome. Being a perceptive man, Scott asks the boy what's wrong, with Ash admitting that he was really looking forward to being a Frontier brain. Shockingly, this causes the Frontier boss to burst out in laughter, and as Ash gives him a confused and slightly offended look, Scott explains that he never said Ash had to win their battle to become a brain, just that he had to face him. In fact, none of the other 7 Frontier brains managed to beat him and Ho-Oh either, with Ash and Brandon having come the closest. This puts a smile back on Ash's face, as he asks if this means he gets to be a Frontier brain after all, with Scott nodding that he most certainly does. He then declares the Battle Junction is officially open for business, and at its head, he is proud to present the newest member of the Kanto Battle Frontier, Junction Master Ash. And that's where we'll leave the story of what if Ash became a Frontier brain for now. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed it. And if you did, please don't forget to like, subscribe, and leave your thoughts in the comments below. And I will see you as the journey continues.